Hey guys, this is Comic Uno, and today I'm doing Comic Uno's Best Comics of the Week, and this is the show where I review all the comics I've read this week in one show. We go least favorite to best pick of the week and everything in between, so let's get started. And of course, at the end of the video, I do talk about the viewer's pick of the week, so in the comments below, let me know your pick of the week for a chance to be featured on the episode. So honestly, it was a pretty heavy haul for Christmas, which is why this video is up on Thursday and not Wednesday. Still want to review the books, but I'm not going to be reviewing the books on Christmas. But let's get started. Number 14 for me is the Metamorpho, the Element Man, issue 1. I never can really get into this character, and which is why this is so low. It is not a bad book and honestly embraces more of that Silver Age DC Comics side of things, but I just never particularly could get into this character, never could get into that tone of DC Comics, the more weirder side, Jack Kirby side of DC Comics. But I'm going to give it 2 stars. I do think this is for someone. It just depends on what type of DC fan you are. Moving on to number 13, the topic of the video already, and that is the Amazing Spider-Man issue 64. So what I wanted to discuss first is that they did already announce the new creative team of the Amazing Spider-Man, which is not really a new creative team at all. It's pretty similar artists. So John Romita Jr. is back on, and then Joe Kelly, who's been a Marvel writer slash Spider-Man writer, a fill-in writer a lot of the times since before Dan Slott was Spider-Man, is now the official writer for Spider-Man. And a lot of people thought he was just going to be a filler writer until they got the next person. So now that's the official announcement for this being the creative team. You know you're getting a lot of the same old, same old. And 2 of the books I'm going to talk about is the future of Marvel and maybe not loving the same old, same old. So the Amazing Spider-Man in particular, this issue really shows, and this actually wasn't written by Joe Kelly. This is written by Ireland, who is kind of the filler writer for Joe Kelly. So, but it's a pretty similar tone of Spider-Man. He is dealing with this 8th death the sin situation where he is working with Doctor Strange. He might die, really die, and die forever. He's worried about that. And you get the menacing people in the background that's connected to that, all while he's obviously dealing with his day-to-day life of, how do I help Aunt May? I have this girlfriend who's getting disappointed in me. Woe is me. That's the thing that's a little frustrating, and I'm actually going to talk about another comic book that I think does the new girlfriend a little bit better than this comic does, even though that girlfriend does feel familiar to maybe some of the other girlfriends we've gotten for that character. You'll see when we get to that book that's a bit higher than this one. But yeah, like what I really am frustrated by is that even when they try something new, like this death side of Spider-Man, it doesn't feel too exciting. It feels like everything else Marvel has been doing to events and their characters always having to deal with death, honestly. Anytime there's a major moment in these characters' lives, it's just like, oh, they're gonna die and come back, especially the past 2 or 3 years. So to have that attached to the same old story that Peter's been going through, it's been not as exciting to read Amazing Spider-Man, all while Ultimate Spider-Man, I think, has been moving their plot and doing those character beats a little bit better. So I think it's going to be a little while until we can really promise that Spider-Man's going to be doing anything new with the Amazing Spider-Man, at least. So I think you also have to temper expectations and know this is probably going to be your more action-y popcorn flick book, while Ultimate Spider-Man might be the book that you want a little bit more if you're looking for character development. So moving on to number 12, which is the one I was alluding to before about the future of Marvel, and that is Timeslide issue 1. They do these every year. They tend to honestly not connect it to a major character with time travel, so that was kind of a cooler element where we get Bishop and Cable. But with this issue, they do a big deal of trying to show the future of Marvel. So you get to see Dark Phoenix, and obviously Doctor Doom's going to be playing a big part in this next chapter. But all they do is tease it in such a way where it's just visuals, and there's really nothing else here to be like, this is what's going to happen, or for you to get excited for what's going to happen next. And honestly, the Doctor Doom stuff and even Dark Phoenix, it just feels regurgitated to everything else that Marvel has been doing the past 10 years, where I do want something a little bit more exciting. And again, this is is coming from a Marvel fan. I'm a bigger Marvel fan than DC, and I think that's why that disappoints me. But I will talk about a side of Marvel that I have been enjoying a lot, that I want to see other titles be more like. So yeah, Timeslide is a lot of the same stuff that I don't think you necessarily need to pick up, if I'm being honest. And I think the times where they do look at the past and they try to add character development, it just, there wasn't any emotion there, and I think that could have been the trick for this book to be a little bit stronger. It was just have that emotional pull if they don't want to tease so much about the future. All right, moving on to number 11, which is West Coast Avengers issue 2, a book I really, really want to like, and I'll probably give another issue, but I feel like the artwork could be stronger for this one. Every single time I look at it, I remember it being stronger the last issue, and then I read it and I'm like, oh, especially if you look at the details, it just doesn't feel as strong, the facial expressions and the action, but I do like the darker palette compared to maybe your average Avengers book. With this one, it focuses on some sides of the team, like opens up with Spider-Woman and doing her espionage thing. I like that. But then it goes back to Iron Man and Ultron, and they get a little bit of Firestar, even though it kind of teased that Firestar was going to be a big part of this issue. And honestly, it just focuses on so much that's not the West Coast Avengers, where I'm like, well, I'm here for the West Coast Avengers. I want to see them interact. I want to see what their team's like. And then we just keep going to Tony Stark and Iron Man, that I feel like we're already getting in the regular Avengers book that is not necessary for the West Coast Avengers. So I've been a bit disappointed with this one. We'll see where next issue goes, but I don't know how long this is going to stay on my pull list. So giving that 2.5 stars, and that is number 11. Moving on to number 10, Batman, Santa Claus, The Silent Night Return. I think this depends on what you're looking for on your pull list. If you're looking for a palate cleanser, kind of fun, again, popcorn flick, check this one out. It's the DC Universe teaming up with Santa Claus. Santa Claus ends up on the Justice League. Artwork is really solid for this book. I like the action a lot. But, as someone who liked the character beats a little bit more and the focal point on the Bat family in that last volume from last year, I do think the last one was stronger. But if you only know this one, you're gonna be like, this was fun enough. So overall, as a fan of that previous volume, I am giving this 2.5 stars, but no harm to no foul on this. It is, again, a good palate cleanser as you might read some more serious books as your haul goes on. Moving on to number 9, which is Justice League Unlimited issue 2. I'm a bit torn on this one because it's everything I want and everything I don't want all at the same time. I'm not a huge team book fan. It's harder for me to get into team books because I do like those character stories a little bit more. But I like the element of these characters that you would normally not see in a book or see in their own book, like Martian Manhunter or Carol Ferris or Mary Marvel, and they're all teaming up together, and it's a pretty simple story of these kids being harmed, and Martian Manhunter gets upset about it, and now the team's like, what's going on with Martian Manhunter? We gotta help him out. So it's just cool to see these characters interact, but it also feels very simple because of that, and they're obviously spread really thin because you have to focus on so many characters, and that's just a pet peeve of mine for team books, is that you gotta focus on so many different things that it's harder to kind of get that big emotional core. But I like the artwork. I want to see where this goes. And if you enjoy those old cartoons, the old Justice League Unlimited cartoon, it really does feel like a modern version of that. So overall, giving that one 3 stars, and that is number 9. Moving on to number 8, which is Hornsby and Halo issue 2. This is a book I feel like that has a ton of potential, but I still don't know how to feel as I read it. We get to see that there's a devil and angel character. They don't seem to know that they're devils and angels, and they're dealing with that. The slow burn for me is what frustrates me a little bit. I kind of just want to see them as devil and angels at this point, but you are learning a lot about them. You're learning about their backstory and how they differ in their family lives, and I enjoyed that aspect. I like the art, and I think this book does have a lot of potential. It just depends on what direction it ends up going in. So giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 8. Moving on to number 7, which is Absolute Wonder Woman issue 3. There's always something interesting in these books that kind of move you forward. And there's definitely, I will say this issue felt a little long at points, which is why it's not in my top 5. But I liked beats from it. I really liked Wonder Woman revealing that she took her arm off and how that happened. I somewhat like the dynamic between the past and the present. I think works pretty well. I like her relationship with characters that we know, and we're going to see how they shape, her relationship with Steve, her relationship now with Cheetah/Barbara in this issue. So I just feel like the book has a lot of potential. I don't know if this hits as hard as issue 1 does or issue 2, honestly, but I'm curious to see where this one's gonna go. It does just feel very unique and I think it also depends on how big of a Wonder Woman fan you are. I'm not a huge Wonder Woman fan, so, maybe that's why I'm not as connected, but as a casual fan, I'm still interested to see where it goes. So giving that one 3.5 stars, and that is number 7. Moving on to number 6, which is Black Canary, Best of the Best, issue 2. This is another one that feels a little crowded at times. They're focusing on the fight, which does feel a little prolonged at times, especially for the art style. But I love the past. I love her relationship with her mom, and then how her mom pushed her as a fighter. I love that dynamic, and that really drives this book home for me. There's other things, again, that meander a little bit, but I like the structure overall, and I want to see where this one goes, because they definitely keep you on the edge of your seat. You definitely don't know what the end result of this fight's going to be, which is honestly kind of fun and unique for a fight/sports book, because usually there's only kind of 2 ways you could go. Either you win or you lose. Here, they kind of keep pulling you in different directions in a new way because of bets and what happened to her mom in the end of this issue. So I like that aspect of the book. So overall, giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 6. Moving on to number 5, which is Uncanny Valley, issue 7. This book, I believe, was just supposed to be a 1 through 6. Now they've been expanded because the book is doing well. I don't feel like it missed a beat. I really like the emotion here between the family, where they're from. The son is now in another world that he's never been in, and figuring out why he's the chosen one, and how that life might be different than his regular life, all while father and daughter are fighting about how she was raised, and her being able to be the chosen one too and not allowing it, but them having some conflict again with their relationship, which I really thought was the heart of this issue, honestly. And I'm curious to see where that's going to go and take our individual characters. I will say I love the meta-ness of this book, but there were some times where I think it went a little bit too far in this issue with the eraser, but we'll see where that ends up taking us as the series goes on. But I'm very happy to see that this series is staying, and overall giving that one 4 stars, and that is number 5. Moving on to number 4, which is X-Men issue 9. I'm really enjoying X-Men. So I was talking about how I feel like Spider-Man's been stalled. I feel like Timeslide didn't really tease anything exciting from Marvel. But this is the side of Marvel I've been really enjoying, and I want to see more like with other franchises. So I think this does a really good job at feeling modern, but also being like, hey, you know what? Everyone hated the X-Men. Maybe not everyone does. And how are the X-Men dealing with that? Obviously, there are still people that are bigots, but there's like this more morally gray line that they're able to play with here. And I think this issue does a great job at that with Rogue and Cyclops and their relationship to Professor X. Again, if you follow the Bible of Marvel Comics, Professor X is the best guy ever. They all obviously have to follow him. And then Cyclops is like, no, we've always been following his dream, and that's kind of why we've been in the position we've been in. Find your own dream, find your own path. And there's just a really great back and forth between the two of them that gets me excited for the event to come with Professor Xavier, building up to that event to make it not just like, oh, Professor Xavier is back. You're like, now I want to see him back. I want to see what story that's going to bring. And I just feel like the X-Men has been doing a really good job of the character stories and feeling like old X-Men while just kind of moving forward at the same time. Great creative teams as well. So overall, giving that one 4 stars. I've been pleasantly surprised where X-Men's been going. All right, moving on to number 3, which is Superman, issue 21. I love this book. I think it does a great job at balancing just the mundane date story between Superman and Lois now that Lois has powers, all while this is not a filler issue. It intertwines with what's going on with Doomsday and building that story. Even the interludes of just seeing where Jimmy's at or Lex Luthor is at is actually building their stories as well. It just does such a great job at doing stuff with their supporting cast, making everything kind of feel big while characters always at the center. It really is about Lois and Clark's relationship in this issue, while you have beautiful artwork as well. So overall, giving that one 4 stars, and that is number 3. Moving on to number 2, the book I was alluding to also with Spider-Man, and that is Detective Comics issue 1092. What I like about this book a lot is that we've seen the story before. We've seen Bruce Wayne fall for, and maybe, pretend to fall for a girl for the sake of the crime or the sake of him being Batman. And I really liked his relationship with this girl because they build it up, and you get to see the girl is, okay, she's a little actiony, so she's a little different from Catwoman or, you know, any other of Batman's love interests, because they didn't start that way. They didn't start as a Catwoman, or they're not just a civilian. They're doing something a little different. All while, again, you have these enhanced, not drugs, but this enhanced side of Batman going on that's connected to her. She's connected to this jail, so that brings into the detective story. The artwork's really solid. You bring in the Bat family as well. It's just really well balanced, and then again, it goes back to, it feels like what we've seen with Batman. We've seen a detective story before. We've seen him interact with his Bat family. We've seen Bruce in liking a girl and helping the case, but the way feels fresh, and I really liked how this is being told. So I'm giving that 4 stars. That is my number 2 pick. Moving on to number 1, which is the exceptional X-Men issue 4, of course. Personal preference. I just love this book. It kind of hits everything I enjoy about comics. I love a good slice of life high school story, so you get to see that with the New Mutants, and you get a more modern take with that of them accepting her being a mutant, her just want to try out for the play, but then also doing the X-Men stuff after school, which feels different because usually the X-Men's always at their own schools. You don't get to see them at public school or just deal with other kids. So I enjoyed that aspect. And then this Kitty and Bobby thing going on in the background, where Bobby is giving intel to someone, which we don't know, and looking after Kitty, kind of hitting Kitty me like, hey, why are you doing this kind of 9-to-5 job and this after school program with these young mutants? Like, you could be joining the X-Men, you could be doing bigger things. And, you know, it really hits the emotional weight where Kitty's like, I killed people and I need to deal with that. And then the kids hear about it, of course, so you're like, oh, okay, you know, the things just dropped here. So you got that emotional weight, you got the growth of the kids. For me, it's just such a well-balanced book with great artwork. I think this style fits really well for it, and again, hits those facial expressions really, really well. So overall, giving that 4 stars. That is my pick of the week. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite book of the week was. And last week, many people said Ultimate Spider-Man. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.